I didn't scream when I saw the sign. I didn't cry either. I just stopped. My car rolled to a slow crawl as I turned onto my street, muscle memory guiding me like it always did after a long workday. The sun was dipping low, washing everything in that tired orange glow that usually meant I was almost home. Almost safe. Almost done pretending I wasn't exhausted. Then I saw it. A bright white sign, staked deep into the center of my lawn. Bold red letters. Clean. Confident. Sold. Not for sale. Not pending. Sold. My foot slammed on the brake so hard the seatbelt cut into my shoulder. The car jerked to a stop halfway past my driveway. For a moment, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. 3 weeks on the road will do that to you. Sleep deprivation, airport food, constant pressure. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I reversed slowly and parked crooked, not caring how it looked. My hands were shaking as I pushed the door open and stepped out. The house looked the same. Blue shutters. White porch railing. The small crack in the third step I'd been meaning to fix for months. My house. I walked closer, my work bag still hanging from my shoulder, my mind scrambling for explanations that didn't make sense. Maybe the realtor messed up. Maybe the sign was for a neighbor. Maybe. The front door was open. That's when the fear finally hit. I crossed the lawn at a jog and pushed the door wider. The smell inside wasn't right. Cardboard. Tape. Dust. Boxes. Everywhere. My living room, my quiet, carefully built sanctuary, was unrecognizable. The couch was wrapped in plastic. Lamps were stacked in a corner. My books, the ones I'd hauled from apartment to apartment in my 20s, were sealed inside labeled cartons like they were inventory. My life had been packed up without me. Well, a voice said calmly from the kitchen, look who finally made it back. I froze. Daniel stepped into view, holding a roll of packing tape like this was just another Tuesday. My stepfather. He smiled like nothing was wrong. Like he hadn't just ripped the ground out from under me. Long trip, he added. I dropped my bag. It hit the floor with a dull thud. Why? I said slowly, afraid my voice would break if I went any faster. Is there a sold sign on my lawn? Daniel sighed, long and theatrical, like I'd interrupted him during something important. Oh, he said, waving a hand. That. We took care of it. My stomach twisted. We. I repeated. What do you mean we? He finally looked at me properly then, eyebrows lifting like I was being difficult on purpose. Your mother and I, he said. Obviously. I took a step toward him. You sold my house. He laughed. Not awkwardly. Not nervously. He laughed like someone who knew they were in control. Sweetheart, he said, placing the tape down and patting my shoulder, you don't need a luxury home like this. Not at your age. It's excessive. Something hot climbed up my spine. This is not a luxury home, I said. This is my home. I bought it. I pay the mortgage. You had no right. Daniel's smile didn't falter. Oh, come on, he said lightly. You really think you did all this by yourself? I shrugged his hand off. I did, I said. He tilted his head, studying me the way you might study a child who didn't understand the rules of a game. It's family money, he said smoothly. Shared assets. You don't actually own anything outright. The words landed like a slap. Family money. Shared assets. That's not true, I said. That's not how it works. He smirked. You signed the paperwork, he replied. You should really read the fine print. My hands started to shake. Here's the thing, the part that still makes my stomach churn when I think about it. I had paid for the house. Every payment. Every utility bill. Every repair. But when I bought it at 24, the bank had required a cosigner. My credit was good, just not perfect. My mother had volunteered Daniel. It's just paperwork, she'd said back then. It doesn't change anything. I believed her. What I didn't know, what no one thought I'd ever find out, was that while I was traveling for work months later, Daniel had refinanced the mortgage behind my back. Quietly. Legally. Strategically. My name had been removed from the deed. "Where is my mom?" I asked, my voice tight. Daniel checked his watch. "Already in Greece," he said. She needed a break. A hollow ache opened in my chest. "So you sold my house," I said. "Took the money and left me with nothing." "Don't be dramatic," he replied, pinching my cheek like I was 5 years old. "You're young. You'll bounce back." I stepped away, disgust curling in my gut. Daniel zipped up a sleek suitcase by the door and grabbed his jacket. "I'd love to stay and chat," he said casually, "but I've got a flight to catch. Business class this time." He walked past me, paused, and smiled. "I'll bring you back something nice." Then he was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving me standing alone in a house that no longer belonged to me. I sank onto the bare floor, surrounded by boxes, staring at the walls that had held every version of me I'd worked so hard to become. And for the first time since I'd seen that sign, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. And someone had made it for me. I don't remember how long I sat there. Time did something strange after Daniel left, stretched thin, then collapsed in on itself. The house felt too quiet, not the peaceful quiet I was used to after a long day, but the kind that presses against your ears until you feel like screaming just to prove you still exist. I stood eventually, moving through the rooms like a stranger. The kitchen counters were bare. The photo frames were gone. Even the small plant by the window, the one I'd somehow kept alive through years of travel, had been packed into a box marked miscellaneous. Miscellaneous. That's what my life had become. I pulled my phone out and called my mother. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. By the 4th call, my hands were trembling. Not just with anger, but with the slow, sick realization creeping up my spine. She already knew. I sent a text. "Call me. Now." 3 dots appeared. Then vanished. A moment later, a message came through. "We'll talk when we're home. This isn't something to discuss over the phone." I stared at the screen until it dimmed. She wanted to wait. After they sold my house. After the money was gone. After Daniel boarded his flight. I sank against the wall and slid down to the floor. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped wire around my ribs and kept twisting. I pressed my forehead into my knees and tried to breathe. That's when the front door opened again. I flinched so hard my heart slammed against my throat. "Hey," a familiar voice said gently. I looked up. Ethan. My boyfriend. He took one look at my face, at the boxes, the empty walls, and didn't ask a single question. He set his keys down and crossed the room in 3 long strides, wrapping his arms around me. I didn't cry. I just stood there, stiff and shaking, while he held me like I might fall apart if he let go. "They sold it," I said finally, my voice muffled against his chest. "They sold my house." He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush me. He just listened while the words poured out. Daniel's smirk, the paperwork, my mother's silence. Every ugly detail spilled into the quiet space between us. When I finished, I felt emptied out. Ethan pulled back just enough to look at me. His expression was calm. Focused. "Okay," he said. I stared at him. "Okay." "We don't panic," he repeated. "Not yet." I laughed bitterly. "I don't see a lot of options here." "We document," he said. "We slow down. And we figure out exactly what they did." "And if they didn't do anything wrong?" I asked quietly. "What if they got away with it?" Ethan met my eyes without flinching. "Then we make sure they never get to do it again." That night, neither of us slept. While he ordered food I barely touched, I pulled every folder I owned out of storage. Mortgage papers. Bank statements. Email chains. Anything with my name on it. I spread them across the floor like puzzle pieces. That's when I found it. The refinancing documents. My stomach dropped as I scanned the pages. I flipped back and forth, reading faster, then slower, hoping I'd missed something. My name wasn't there. Not crossed out. Not misspelled. Gone. Months ago, while I was working out of state, Daniel had refinanced the mortgage entirely under his name. Legally. Strategically. I checked my bank account next. The deposit from the sale hit like a punch to the chest. $512,000. Then came the withdrawals. Luxury hotels. Designer boutiques. Wire transfers overseas. The balance drained faster than I could process it. I sank onto the floor, my back against the couch, staring at the screen until the numbers blurred. They burned through everything, I whispered. Ethan knelt beside me, his jaw tight. Not everything, he said. They left a trail. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a lawyer recommended by a colleague, someone known for being thorough and unpleasant in exactly the right way. The second was to my uncle, my mother's older brother. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said. "What's wrong?" By the time I finished explaining, the silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "He refinanced without your consent?" the lawyer asked later that day, her voice measured. "If there's forgery involved, that's fraud." My uncle was less restrained. "He's been hiding income for years," he said bluntly. "If he was sloppy enough to pull this, he's sloppy enough to leave evidence." For the first time since this started, something inside me shifted. I didn't tell my mother anything. I didn't confront Daniel. I let them enjoy their trip. While they posted photos of sunsets and wine glasses, I gathered documents. Signed forms. Opened cases. Something quiet settled over me. Not rage, not grief. Focus. 3 days before Daniel's return, my lawyer called. "We found it," she said. "Forged signatures. Irregular filings. A sale that should never have happened. The transaction was illegal," she said calmly. Minutes later, my uncle called, almost laughing. "You're going to like this," he said. "Hidden accounts. Unreported income." He's in deep. I stood in the empty living room and smiled for the first time in weeks. Daniel thought he'd won. He had no idea the game was already over. Daniel landed on a Tuesday. I knew because my mother posted a photo from the airport. 2 champagne flutes clinking, the caption something smug about well-earned rest. I stared at it longer than I should have, then closed the app without reacting. Let them believe everything was fine. The night before his return, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, but because my mind wouldn't slow down. Once you see how deep a betrayal runs, your brain doesn't let you unsee it. It connects dots you didn't even know were there. The refinancing hadn't just been about the house. It was about control. Daniel had always liked having leverage. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He smiled, nodded, patted shoulders. He positioned himself as the reasonable one while quietly tightening the net. I saw it now in retrospect. How he'd insisted on helping with paperwork. How he'd brushed off my questions. How my mother had echoed his words almost verbatim. Family money. Shared responsibility. Don't overthink it. I had overthought nothing. I'd trusted them. That was my mistake. The morning Daniel came back, I wasn't at the house. I didn't need to be. My lawyer had already filed the fraud notice, and the bank had placed a temporary hold on the property. Everything after that would unfold without my presence. Ethan drove me to a cafe across town instead. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere quiet. We sat by the window, watching people move through their ordinary lives, coffee in hand, phones pressed to their ears, unaware that my world was mid-collapse. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. Then my mother's name appeared. I let it ring. A minute later, a text came through. "Something's wrong." The house isn't opening. I stared at the message, my heart steady in a way that surprised me. Another text followed. Daniel says the keypad isn't working. Did you change something? I set my phone face down on the table. Let it play out, Ethan said quietly. Across town, Daniel was standing in front of the house he no longer owned, pressing buttons that wouldn't respond. He was probably frowning, confused, irritated, maybe even laughing it off. Right up until his card declined. The lawyer called an hour later. Accounts are frozen, she said. The bank flagged the transfers. The sale proceeds are under review. I closed my eyes and breathed out slowly. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls. Voicemails. Messages growing increasingly frantic. My mother finally got through. Ena, she said, her voice shaking. Do you know what's happening? I took a sip of water before answering. You sold my house, I said calmly. This is the bigger picture. She inhaled sharply. We were just trying to help you. No, I replied. You were trying to manage me. There was a pause. Then she started crying, not the soft, guilty kind, the panicked kind. I hung up. That night, my uncle texted. IRS is involved now. He's panicking. Good. 2 days later, my mother kicked Daniel out. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from my uncle, who sounded almost amused. She locked him out, he said. Told him to deal with his mess. Where is he now? I asked. No idea, he replied. Probably a motel. Or his car. I leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. For years, Daniel had treated me like a resource, something to extract value from and discard. Now he was homeless. The irony sat heavy in my chest. That evening, there was a knock at Ethan's door. I already knew who it was. Daniel stood there looking smaller than I remembered. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes sunken. The confidence that had always wrapped around him like armor was gone. Please, he said hoarsely. I just need somewhere to stay. I didn't step aside. This isn't your home, I said evenly. His face twisted. You're ungrateful, he snapped. Selfish. After everything I did for you. I stared at him, unmoved. When he refused to leave, I picked up my phone. There's a man outside my door, I said calmly when the dispatcher answered. He's refusing to leave. Daniel bolted before the police arrived. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. After that, everything unraveled fast, but quietly. The IRS investigation escalated. What started as an audit turned into something far more serious once the forged mortgage documents surfaced. Forging a signature isn't a misunderstanding. It's a felony. My lawyer filed the case immediately. Once that happened, there was no stopping it. Daniel tried to salvage what little he had left, calling old contacts, former clients, even relatives he'd mocked for years. No one answered. When people smell legal trouble, they disappear. My mother went into survival mode. She froze accounts. Hired a lawyer. Filed for divorce. Not because she understood what she'd done to me, but because fear finally outweighed loyalty. Don't confuse protection with remorse. My uncle had warned me. I didn't. A week later, my lawyer called again. They flagged his passport, she said. He tried to book a flight out last night. I sat up straighter. And he was stopped at the airport. I nearly laughed. Daniel, the man who once told me I didn't deserve a house, was now trapped by his own paperwork. And the story wasn't over yet. The arrest didn't make the news. That surprised me at first. I'd half expected flashing headlines or at least a short article buried somewhere online. But real consequences rarely come with drama. They arrive quietly, stamped on envelopes, whispered through lawyers, delivered in rooms with fluorescent lighting and no windows. Daniel's world didn't explode. It collapsed inward. The official notice came 2 days after the airport incident. My lawyer forwarded it with a single line attached. This is moving fast. Federal investigation. Financial fraud. Forgery. Each word felt unreal when I read it, like they belonged to someone else's life. But they were attached to his name. Permanently. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. What I felt was distant. As if I'd already grieved the version of my family I thought I had, and everything happening now was just paperwork catching up to reality. My mother called that evening. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. On the 4th call, I picked up. "Ena," she whispered, her voice thin. "Something's very wrong." I leaned against the kitchen counter in Ethan's apartment and waited. "They froze everything," she continued. "Daniel's accounts. The joint savings. Even my credit card was declined at the grocery store." I closed my eyes. "And?" I asked. "They said there's an investigation," she said, breath hitching. "They asked about the house. About the refinancing." I said nothing. "Do you know anything about this?" she asked. I thought about the sold sign. The boxes. The way she'd told me to wait. "You told me to look at the bigger picture," I said calmly. I finally did. Her breathing grew uneven. "We were just trying to help you," she insisted weakly. "No," I said. "You were trying to decide for me." She started crying then. Full sobs. I ended the call. 2 days later, Uncle David texted me. "Daniel's business is frozen. Clients are pulling out. Banks won't touch him." I replied with one word. Good. The settlement process moved quietly. Efficiently. The fraudulent sale was officially reversed, but that didn't mean I got the house back. Too many hands had touched it. Too many legal knots tied around it. Insurance covered part of the loss. The rest came from what little Daniel had left. I didn't fight for the house. I didn't want it anymore. The place had become a stage, one where he'd rehearsed betrayal for months while smiling to my face. Owning it again wouldn't erase that. So I walked away. 3 weeks later, I signed papers for a new home. Smaller. Cleaner. Unquestionably mine. No co-signers. No family help. No fine print. When I held the deed in my hands, my name printed alone at the top, something in my chest finally loosened. Peace doesn't announce itself. It just settles. My mother tried again after that. She called one afternoon while I was unpacking boxes in the new place. "Ena," she said softly. "I want to apologize." I didn't respond. "I should have trusted you," she continued. "I should have talked to you." I sat on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked books, and listened without interrupting. "You chose him," I said quietly when she finished. "Every time it mattered." She inhaled sharply. "You don't get to rewrite that now." She cried. I ended the call. That was the last conversation we ever had. Weeks passed. Daniel's case moved forward. Slowly. Relentlessly. Charges stacked. Deals fell apart. People who once praised him suddenly didn't remember his name. According to my uncle, he was sleeping on a friend's couch, when he could find one. According to my lawyer, prison was a real possibility. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new place watching the city lights flicker on, Ethan asked me something I hadn't considered yet. "Do you regret it?" he said gently. I thought about it. About the house. About the money. About the family I no longer had. "No," I said finally. "I regret trusting people who benefited from my silence." He nodded like that made perfect sense. And it did. Because what Daniel never understood, what my mother never did either, was that I didn't lose my home when that sold sign went up. I lost it the moment they decided I didn't deserve ownership over my own life. Everything that followed was just correction. Life didn't snap back into place after that. It softened. The days stopped feeling like emergencies and started feeling intentional. I woke up in a space that didn't hold echoes of other people's decisions. No tension in the walls. No sense that something could be taken from me if I turned my back. My new house didn't impress anyone. It wasn't in a gated neighborhood. It didn't have soaring ceilings or a manicured lawn. The kitchen was small, the bedrooms modest, the view unremarkable. And yet, every time I unlocked the door, my shoulders dropped. This place didn't demand anything from me. I paid for it alone. I signed everything alone. I owned it without explanation. That mattered more than square footage ever could. Work became easier too, or maybe I just carried less weight into it. I traveled again, flew out for inspections, stood on construction sites with a hard hat pressed low over my eyes. But this time, when I came home, I didn't feel like I was returning to something fragile. Nothing here could be sold out from under me. Ethan noticed the change before I did. "You're quieter," he said one night while we cooked dinner together. But not in a bad way. I smiled. "I think I finally stopped bracing for impact." He nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. News about Daniel came in fragments. Never from him. Never directly. Always secondhand, filtered through lawyers and relatives who spoke in hushed tones now, as if his name carried weight it hadn't before. Federal charges were filed. Not just for the mortgage fraud, but for years of hidden income, forged records, false filings. The house had been the crack that let everything else spill out. He tried to negotiate. Tried to bargain. Tried to paint himself as confused, overwhelmed, misinformed. None of it worked. Paper trails don't care how charming you are. At one point, he asked to speak to me through his attorney. I said no. There was nothing left to say. My mother disappeared from my life quietly. No dramatic confrontation. No final apology tour. Just distance that solidified into absence. She sent one last message weeks later. "I hope one day you'll understand." I deleted it. Understanding wasn't the issue. Boundaries were. One afternoon, Uncle David called with what he labeled the final update. "He took a plea," he said. "Reduced sentence, but it's still serious. Financial penalties. Probation. Community service. Reputation's gone." I closed my eyes. "Thank you for telling me," I said. After I hung up, I sat on the couch and let the silence stretch. I expected to feel something sharp. I didn't. Just relief. That night, I stood in my kitchen washing a single mug, mine, chipped at the rim, familiar, and realized something that made me laugh softly to myself. For years, I'd been told I was too young to know what I wanted. Too ambitious. Too focused. Too independent. What they'd really meant was that I was inconvenient. I didn't need a luxury home. They were right about that. What I needed was autonomy. No one tells you how unsettling freedom can feel at first. How quiet it is. How you keep waiting for someone to step in and claim authority over your choices. But no one did. The world didn't collapse because I stopped asking permission. It expanded. A month later, I hosted a small dinner in my new place. Nothing fancy, just a few friends, takeout containers spread across the counter, laughter bouncing off the walls. Someone asked casually, "So what happened with your old house?" I paused, then shrugged. "I lost it," I said simply. "And then I found something better." They didn't press. They didn't need to. That night, after everyone left, I stood alone in my living room. The lights were low. The air smelled like food and comfort and familiarity. I thought about the woman I'd been when I pulled onto that street and saw the sold sign. Exhausted. Certain I'd done everything right. Unaware of how vulnerable trust could make you. She hadn't been weak. She'd just believed the wrong people. And the woman standing here now? She read everything. She asked questions. She owned her decisions. I turned off the lights and headed to bed, the door locking behind me with a solid final click. For the first time in a long time, that sound didn't feel like protection. It felt like ownership. The next few weeks passed with a calm I hadn't known in years. Daniel faded into the background of my life like smoke after a fire. I didn't follow the court proceedings closely. My uncle and my lawyer handled it, but updates trickled in occasionally, like notes from a war I no longer had to fight. He was facing serious charges. Felony fraud. Forgery. Heavy fines. Probation. Even the chance of prison. People who had once smiled at his name now avoided it. His so-called influence evaporated faster than I could have imagined. And me. I woke up every day in my own home. My space. My rules. My life. It was the little things that made the difference. I painted the walls without asking anyone for approval. I arranged my furniture to fit my routines, not someone else's idea of what looked good. I cooked when I felt like it. Slept when I was tired. Laughed when something genuinely amused me. Every day was small, ordinary, and mine. And somehow, that was more valuable than any mansion with a sold sign in front. Ethan stayed close, steady, always watching for me, never hovering. He didn't offer pity. He offered partnership, respect, trust. One evening, we sat on the balcony with a bottle of wine, watching the city lights twinkle like tiny stars, and I realized how much lighter I felt. I had spent years carrying invisible weight, the approval of people who didn't deserve it, the validation of a family that only valued me as an asset. The illusion that ownership was tied to their consent. I poured wine into our glasses and smiled at him. "Do you know the craziest thing?" I asked. "What?" he said, raising his glass. "I almost don't miss it." He laughed. "Not even a little?" "Not even a little," I said. It was never about the house. It was about control. About freedom. Ethan nodded, understanding. And for the first time, I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to justify the anger, the frustration, the meticulous planning that had led me here. Daniel had taught me a lesson I hadn't asked for, but one I would never forget. Trust cautiously. Read everything. Question everyone. And never, ever hand someone power over your life without the ability to reclaim it. Weeks later, my mother tried once more. A text. Soft. Tentative. Full of excuses. Full of regret I didn't want to pass. I read it. And deleted it. Closure isn't always about conversations or apologies. Sometimes, it's about moving forward while the past collapses quietly behind you. I walked into my kitchen and opened a cabinet. My dishes were arranged neatly. My glasses. My mugs. My coffee maker that I had insisted on buying myself, even if it wasn't luxury. It smelled like normal life. It smelled like me. I poured coffee and leaned against the counter, letting the warmth settle through my hands and into my chest. The city outside was waking up. People moved through streets I had once driven past, oblivious to the chaos I had survived, to the betrayals I had outmaneuvered. And that was fine. I didn't need them to notice. I didn't need anyone to witness my reclamation. Because I had already done it. Quietly. Fully. Permanently. That night, I sat on my balcony again, journal in hand. I wrote down everything I wanted to remember. Not anger, not pain, but the facts. My actions. My boundaries. My victories. I didn't need anyone else to validate them. I didn't need anyone else to acknowledge that I had dismantled the hold Daniel had thought he had over me. I didn't even need my mother to understand. Because this time, it wasn't about them. It was about me. I closed the journal and looked at the skyline. The lights sparkled like nothing had ever happened, like everything was ordinary. And in a way it was. Ordinary, yes, but mine. Completely mine. The sold sign, the boxes, the betrayal, they were ghosts now. Lessons, not shackles. I went inside and locked the door. Turned the key slowly. Twice. The house responded with a quiet click that echoed through the empty rooms. I smiled. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. I was the owner. Not just of a house, but of everything that mattered. And somewhere far away, Daniel was left to rebuild nothing, facing consequences he had never imagined. The irony was satisfying, but it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the warmth of my coffee cup in my hands, the laughter echoing faintly from the street below, the certainty that I would never let anyone decide my life again. This was freedom. This was victory. This was peace. And it was entirely, irrevocably mine.